Today I'm going to tell you why it's so incredibly hard to grow good tomatoes in Florida and in much of the Deep South. Every time I do a video sharing some of our experiences with a particular crop or a method or something else, there's always somebody who goes, well, it's not hard for me. Well, I actually grew 1 million pounds of tomatoes and all I did was just jam a Whopper in the ground. Today I'm going to tell you why it's so difficult to grow in Florida unless you're super special. I'm at the Metropolitan right now with one of the biggest buzzing pieces of art you have ever seen, Solanum Unchained.
Stop! You don't understand art!
What often happens, particularly where I am in Zone 8B, is that it'll warm up and then we'll get a frost. So it might be 80 degrees, 85 degrees. The next week it'll dip down to 25 degrees. Now if you've put your tomatoes in the ground already, this is a problem. But if you haven't put your tomatoes in the ground already, this is also a problem. Because if you don't plant your tomatoes early enough, you are not going to have enough cool weather for them to be happy and them to produce before the bugs, the rain, and especially the heat gets them. So you have to get your tomatoes in the ground as soon as possible, but generally we have this whipsawing effect of temperature that just tears us up.
I eat a raw vegan tomato diet. I eat 15 of these a day. All my weight problems have gone away.
Another issue with tomatoes here is that we get alternating periods of drought and rain. So for example, we'll have 3 to 4 weeks of almost no or none at all, no rain, followed by a rain event with 6 inches or even 10 inches or something ridiculous like that. So what happens is the tomatoes are kind of adjusted to the soil moisture that's already there. Then a bunch of rain comes in, then your tomatoes split, the tomatoes get disease, they just swell up and burst. It's just completely ridiculous. It just batters them and they're not ready for it. They actually do better in this kind of a situation. As you probably saw in my previous video, it took me $10,000 to grow these. Because the rain that's falling right now is not falling on them. This keeps the diseases off, and this also really mitigates the problem of the soil moisture going way up and then going way down and then whoosh, coming way back up again, where you get a flooding rain after a dry period. That really messes with your tomatoes. Another problem with tomatoes here, you'll reach down and you'll grab what you think is a ripe, nice tomato, and then your hand goes into a pile of goo that is full of insects. If you don't get started early enough in the year, when you're in danger of those late frost swings, you're also coming into bug season. And bug season really starts seriously in May, and then in June, it's like super bug season. And your tomatoes are just starting to really get rolling, particularly if you grew those beautiful heirloom, indeterminate types that are climbing up the poles, and you're just starting to get those big, beautiful beefsteaks, and then there's bites out of every single one of them. They're turning to mush. That is, the ones that didn't get destroyed from the rainfall. And that leads us into the next real issue, which is that the heat gets to be so much that the tomato plants simply don't like it. The fruit themselves will scald, and they just suffer excessively, and they don't want to pollinate and set more tomatoes as it gets too hot. And we have a lot of heat here.
It's not the heat. It's the humidity.
We're coming right out of that last frost, and sometimes we're hitting 90 degrees in just a few weeks. It's rough, and tomatoes don't like it. Now this heat, combined with the humidity, is just the perfect conditions for all kinds of weird tomato diseases.
Parasites or fungus is possible.
Or maybe lupus.
We've had tomatoes growing really well, looking beautiful and green, starting to get ripe fruit on them, and then overnight, they just spontaneously wilt, like something has attacked and destroyed the entire vascular system. And you dig around underneath them and try to figure out if something chewed the roots up, or if it was nematodes or a mole or something like that. And the roots look like they're okay, but something just happened to them. They just spontaneously died from some sort of horrible fungal or bacterial condition. This happens more than we would like, and the other diseases that come in, like diseases of the leaves and the lower leaves and things spread, and the tomatoes get weird rot spots on them. They start to look good and then they rot. This just happens all the time. Now, not all of the South is like this. There are areas a little further north of me where tomatoes do excellently. When we were in Middle Tennessee, we had an abundance of tomatoes. We grew them in clay. They loved it. They grew right into the summer and gave us a lot of tomatoes. In central Alabama and parts of Georgia, it depends on how your rainfall comes through. Around here we get almost 70 inches of rain in these great big torrents. And we also don't have the moderation of being near the coast or having a little higher elevation. So our temperature swings are up and down, and the bugs just live here year-round.
As an influencer, my skin is very important to me, so I rub tomatoes on it.
With all this in mind, if you live in a climate like mine, and add to all this, the soil's not very good here, and big stretches we just have acid sand. If you live in a climate like mine, what do you do about all this? So you know tomatoes are hard to grow. What do you do about it? Well, the first thing you could do is just give up on tomatoes and grow other things.
Keep talking, Peggy, because you're the only one making any sense around here.
For multiple years, we have always tried to have a few tomato plants here and there, but we have not counted on them as a big part of our food supply. We've grown plants that really like the climate, and I've talked about this in my books and in some of my other videos. Picking those plants that love your climate and starting with those gives you a core of plants that will always get you through. Tomatoes are just not one of those here, with the notable exception of the Everglades tomato, which is a Florida heirloom variety that is a little bitty tomato that is the most ridiculously productive, long-lasting, self-seeding, bomb-proof tomato we have ever grown. The Everglades tomato, just a little itty-bitty tomato. It's not great for slicing unless you're making hamburgers that are this big, but the flavor is exceptional, and the vigor of the plants is exceptional, and they go through the bugs and the diseases and the heat and the swings and everything else. The only thing they don't like is a frost. That's one thing you can grow. Or, alternately, you can just really work at it. And this is what some of the better gardeners I've known have done. Like really good gardeners. Really good gardeners who really like to spend a lot of time. They start all the transplants indoors. They get perfect compost in the garden. They have cloches to protect from freezing, or cloth, or they have hoops or caterpillar tunnels or greenhouses to grow tomatoes because they just really want tomatoes. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you really want tomatoes and you really want to work for it, you can do it. But this is not ideal because of the vagaries of our climate up and down. So commercial tomatoes are often grown in greenhouses where the rain stays off them, and it is much easier to control the amount of water they get and the temperature swings. We didn't have to worry about late frosts because they were in the greenhouse. Now we don't have to worry about the rain that falls in torrents because it's not falling on them, and we can water exactly how we like. That's a frog. That's a frog that is frog bombing this video. Hey, your mate went over there. I saw her run off with a toad. So far this year, we've managed 106 pounds of Roma tomatoes off of 17 plants, and there's probably another 50 pounds back here. This is way out of the ordinary, and it's only the greenhouse that has allowed this to happen so well. We have tested varieties of tomatoes and put them in the ground, tried to figure out which ones will survive here and do well, and there's some that do better than others, but this has really been the best. We have some friends that moved down here from up north, and the wife was remarking how incredibly frustrating it is that you could grow tomatoes up there easily, and then they move down here and it's just miserable and the tomatoes don't grow, and she really, really wants the tomatoes. It just is what it is. You have to grow what likes your climate. There are plenty of things that love it here and will produce here, but some things are just simply going to break your heart unless you can afford to put in a lot of extra time or some infrastructure to really make it work.
Hey guys, if you want instant gains right here, the tomato is the way to do it.
Just know that in this area, 8B, 9, and even into 10, where you have the sandy soils, the temperature swings, the incredible amount of bugs, the humidity, the disease, etc., tomatoes are not the easiest thing to grow. And even though a lot of tomatoes are grown in Florida and shipped around the country, it's because of the mild climate, and it's grown in commercial conditions with lots and lots of interventions, including greenhouses, fungicidal sprays, insecticides, etc. Everything wants to eat tomatoes. Even if you give up on tomatoes, don't give up on gardening. If you've moved to Florida and you are having difficulty, get my book, Totally Crazy Easy Florida Gardening. It has sold over 1,000 copies. You can see the reviews on Amazon, and I have seen many, many gardens that have been transformed by understanding what grows in Florida and what loves it. If you get those core crops in, your entire gardening will be transformed. Your life will be way, way easier. Way, way easier. We put plants through a death march in our backyard. Crops from all around the world, and we tested them to figure out what would feed us and what would grow despite the heat, the bugs, the disease, etc. So totally crazy easy Florida gardening. Literally, it will transform your gardening and you will have success in your first year. And it's much easier to just grow what likes the climate than it is to try and juggle tomatoes. I was never actually good at juggling, but I have tomatoes here and I'm just gonna throw them up. Thanks for joining me. Glad you're here. Catch you next time, and until then, may your thumbs always be green. I don't really want people watching me juggle. I have no idea. I don't even know why I would do that, like at the end of a... I'm just gonna throw things in here. You ready? I have a really exciting announcement for everybody, and that is I now have my own social media and video course platform, and I'm going to put a link to that below. It is the Survival Gardener on School, and this is where I am putting my awesome food forest design course so you can have an incredible food forest in your backyard. Way simpler than you thought it was. This is not a whole bunch of complicated theory and everything. I give you enough theory to get you started, and then we get right out there and we make things happen. So if you want to join the community, go to the link below. I'd really like to see you there. We've already got some experts, and I'm on there, and we can answer questions and talk back and forth and make posts and start topics, and there are some videos that you really have to see that are more than worth the price of admission. So come join me over on the Survival Gardener group on School. Link below.